Alright, hey, what's up, guys? My name is Mihai, and I just wanted to give my thoughts on the brand new Pixel 10 Pro and what I feel like people are getting wrong about this phone. So, one thing I wanted to talk about is performance. And I'm just going to get straight into the video and say why I think people who are criticizing this phone based on its performance kind of misunderstand what this phone is for Google. And I'll give my thoughts on that as well. So, I've been using this phone for about 5 days now, 6 days now. I got it on a Thursday. It's Monday, so actually this would have been the 5th day. And I've gotten a chance to use it long enough to kind of know its strengths and weaknesses. Also, if you see that right there, I apologize. I'm in my room and the lighting here can be a bit funky. But anyways, I digress. What did I want to talk about this phone regarding performance? So I've seen a lot of chatter online about how this phone is not powerful enough and how Google's Tensor G5 chip isn't performant enough in 2025. And I really kind of wanted to make a video just like addressing those claims because I just think they're wrong. Now, that's not to say that this phone's performance isn't good enough. I think when it comes to day-to-day tasks and even some light gaming, this phone is more than powerful. I think unless you're doing the most intense and hardcore gaming, this phone does everything it needs to perfectly fine. And I feel like this is a bigger problem in the Android community that, again, I feel like I just need to talk about because I feel like so many people misunderstand the point of this phone and what it's trying to accomplish. If you go on the Pixel subreddit, and the reason I'm calling them out, and I'll even have a couple of posts on here talking about why I just think they're completely wrong. All the posts mention how the phone is, 2 to 3 generations behind in terms of performance. And I don't disagree with that. If you look at the benchmarks done on Antutu from certain sites, I will also flash a screenshot talking about that because I forgot the site name. But basically, the CPU is about comparable to a Snapdragon 8 Gen 4, and then the GPU performance, the new one that they're using in this Tensor G5, is comparable to a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. Now, conveniently, the phone I'm using right now to record this video on is a S24 Ultra, which has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 for Galaxy, but it's basically the same chip as far as we're concerned. Now, a lot of people will say like, oh, that's not powerful enough, and at least people in that subreddit will say that. But the thing that really irks me about it is these people haven't used the phone, and they're going based on specs alone. Now, why is that a problem as a whole for the community? I think as a whole for the community, it can undermine certain phones and why they're good. And another common response I will see there is, well, this phone isn't worth it for the price that you're paying, which is $1,000. And again, if you go based on specs alone, based on like performance alone, yeah, you can get a more powerful phone for over, for $1,000. But when you take in consideration what this phone has as a whole package, what it offers as a whole package, it's a pretty compelling offer. The other point I wanted to mention is this phone is primarily aimed at the North American market. Yeah, people in Europe will also get a chance to buy this phone and obviously use this phone, but this phone is mostly like aimed at the North American market. And the reason I say that, because you get so many trade-in deals and so many offers to switch to this phone. And for Americans, you're not going to be paying $1,000 for this phone, or at least the majority of them won't be. This phone is going to be subsidized by carrier plans and trade-in deals. So in reality, this phone won't be $1,000. This phone will be $500, $600, $700. And at that price, that's also compelling. Now, the other argument is, well, the other phones that you're potentially going to be getting are also going to be that price. And yeah, while that's also a valid point, again, this phone is aimed at the North American market, and I wanted to talk about some things it does better than the other phones at this market. You could ignore the notification I got. So let me talk to you about what this phone does great here in America compared to the options that we have. We don't have a lot of good small phones here in America if you want to go on Android side. Now, what I consider a small phone is a phone that's 6.3 inches and under. And North American wise, if you want the best or decent performance, you want amazing cameras, you only have really 3 options. You have the Pixel series, right? So up until the Pixel 10, it was a Pixel 9. You can even argue that the Pixel 9a is a better value than this because how cheap it is. So you have those phones. You have the Samsung S25, the base model, not the Plus or the Ultra. Okay, that's the same comparable size to this phone. In fact, if you look at websites that measure all these phone sizes, the S25 is actually slightly smaller. So in terms of being a true small phone, that would be a better one. And you have the iPhone 16 Pro. I'm not including the Z Flip here because whenever you unfold that phone, it becomes longer aspect ratio wise. And while you can flip it close, I feel like that's its own separate product category. But even if you wanted to include that, the other option at that price range would also be the Moto Flip series. I forgot their names, but that would also be a comparable phone if you really wanted to add that. Now, let's talk about the cameras on this phone compared to the others, okay? And I want to specifically compare it on the Android side because this is the point that I feel like people are missing. This phone's cameras, when it comes to the Android side, are better than, for example, the Samsung S25. Now, what do I mean by better? In terms of the resolution you get for the lenses themselves, you have higher megapixel count all across the board. And I know that megapixel count doesn't necessarily translate to better photos. Otherwise, the Samsung could keep up, but in this case, I want to make a point to really mention that in terms of photos, this Pixel 10 Pro does significantly take better photos than the S25. And that is important because we are not comparing this phone to a big phone. We are comparing this small phone to another small phone in the North American market. Now, in Europe, here's where it gets tricky, okay? In Europe, you have more options for smaller phones. But in North America, you kind of don't. And I feel like that's the point that people on Reddit are missing when it comes to this phone in the North American market. You don't really have any other options if you want a really good camera experience in a small phone package. So to kind of sum it up, and what I'm trying to say here is the performance is good enough and you have great cameras on top of great screen, a fantastic screen, and amazing software features. This phone isn't going to do, the best when it comes to everything. But again, that's not the point of the Pixel, right? The point of the Pixel is to do certain things really, really, really well. In terms of photos, it beats the S25. And when it comes to the iPhone, It's kind of a toss-up. But the difference is, if you want to go on the iPhone, you have to go on iOS. And if you want to stay on Android, you have to stay on Android. Or you have to get an Android phone. So, again, that's kind of the point I'm trying to make with this phone that I feel like everyone is missing. You get a gorgeous screen. You get a fast fingerprint sensor that's been improved this time. You get solid hardware performance. The one lacking part, okay, of this phone is, compared to even my S24 Ultra that I'm recording this video on, okay, the video quality is not that good, okay? It's not going to beat the S24 Ultra, but compared to the S25, again, that's where you have to kind of, compare the two phones. Compared to the S25, this arguably is just as good, if not beats it, in terms of the different, zoom options, video transitions, colors, etc., etc., etc. So, and before this video ends, I'm going to throw some photo samples of the Pixel 10 Pro that I've personally captured, and then I'm also going to link to an article where you can see the photos of an S25 and make your comparison between which one you like over there and also an iPhone, right? So to summarize, I feel like this phone is kind of misunderstood. I feel like people want it to be the best phone ever. And while I would also like that, that's not the point of this phone. This phone does a lot of good things right for the average person. And like other people are saying, this isn't really an enthusiast phone anymore. What I mean by that is, if you want a phone with, faster graphics performance, faster CPU performance to play the most intensive games ever, you should not be looking at this phone. Period. Full stop. Even for video work, right? Get an iPhone. Get an S25 Ultra. But if you want a small, good phone that does the basics, right? That takes great photos, phenomenal photos, and it does decent video, and it can, fit in your pocket, get this phone. I honestly think it's a really good phone worth recommending. I think what Google has done here compared to the past series of, Google phones, I think it's really solid. And this is somebody who is just a normal, everyday user. Anyways, that's my ranting video. I'll end it here. You guys have a good one.